you live in the city?
I lived in Manhattan for 39 years and just in August moved out to Long Island.
Hey, congrats.
Thanks. My wife has always wanted to live out there. She grew up there. Her folks are still out there. Folks not in great health, so we needed to be closer to them. And I actually am shocked that after living in the city for 39 years, I've acclimated to being a Long Islander very quickly.
Yeah.
And where in the city were you?
Well, I lived at 737 Park at 71st and Park. So, loved it up there and loved being in the city and took advantage of all the stuff the city has to offer. But it was time to go. My wife actually, Cynthia, never wanted to move into the city. And we lived here for 17 years together.
You owe her.
So I figured I had to suck it up and do the right thing. But it's been really great. It's shocking. A couple of things shocked me. Number one, the commute on the Long Island Railroad is unbelievable. I get on the train in Manhasset. We stop in Great Neck, and then the next stop is Penn Station. It's 32 minutes. And the other thing that really shocked me is how many real estate people get on that train every morning.
So I just learned something about taking the Long Island Railroad. There's the 6 a.m. crowd, the 8 a.m. crowd, and like the 9 a.m. crowd. And it's like 3 different buckets of totally different people. Yeah. So it's like 6 a.m. or I might be wrong. It might be 7 a.m., whatever it is. But it's like all the traders and hedge fund people. And then because they need to get there before the market opens. And then you have like attorneys and real estate people. And they all kind of take the same seats that they always take. And they always congregate. Yeah. So it's becomes networking. Okay.
I want to just take a step back because some of our viewers and listeners aren't going to know who you are, although I think a lot of them will.
I would hope.
For those that don't know, Bob is known for selling the most properties in New York City, I think, than anyone. So I don't want to go too much into your backstory because I do think a lot of people know it, but give us a quick rundown.
Yeah, just a quick rundown. I've been an investment sales broker in New York City since 1984. Yesterday, I closed deal 2,347.
Wow.
And love the business. For 26 of those years, I owned and ran a company called Massey Knakal with Paul Massey. A couple of things were really great about that company. One, we CoStar started tracking the market in 2001. And from 2001 to 2014, when we sold the business, the number 2 company in New York had sold about 1,300 buildings. We sold over 4,000. So we left the field by more than 3x. And for 14 years in a row did that. 2, we started with just the 2 of us in a small office and a secretary and sold the thing for $100 million, which was really cool. But the thing I'm most proud of about the Massey Knakal years is that today in New York City investment sales, there are 31 companies or divisions of companies that are either owned by or run by people we taught the business to. So if you think about what the Massey Knakal legacy is or what I'm most proud of about that whole experience was that, we tangibly and fundamentally changed people's lives for the better. And, as long as I'm not directly competing with these folks, I wish them all the luck in the world.
And it's great to see. Do you stay in touch with most of them?
Absolutely.
I'll say 2 things quickly. I love it because these are like Wayne Gretzky stats. These are not.
It's insane.
This is. Well, I don't think very few people in the market. I mean, tons of brokers do big volume, sell big bill. I don't think anybody can say that things.
It's next level.
And I will say, when I was just getting started in my real estate career, which not that long ago, every single person I talked to, especially I had one uncle who was already kind of in the business. He was a real estate attorney. He always told me to aim for Massey Knakal. And that's directly huge. Or indirectly, like you and Paul Massey were the guys. I still think you guys are.
Well, and talking about stats, I know one thing that you've done in the past is kind of you're a big baseball fan. I know you would have sort of baseball stats on
Yankees fan,
your business.
Well, let's talk
you're
about
a Long
New York
Islander
sports.
Now, so I don't know.
No, but I lifelong diehard Yankee fan, but always wanted to see the Mets do well. Rooted for the Mets. In fact, my first baseball memory is actually running home from school to watch the 69 series, Mets and Orioles, with my grandfather, who was a big baseball fan. And back in those days, they played World Series games in the afternoon. So I remember running home from school to watch it. But lifelong diehard Yankee fan, always rooted for the Mets, 69, 73, 86. Lifelong diehard New York Giants football fan, but always wanted to see the Jets do well. Lifelong diehard Ranger fan. I hope the Islanders and the Devils lose every game they play.
It's conflicting for me now. I share the same interests. I have a friend who's now playing for the Devils, and it's very tough to see because you want to be supportive, but man,
all
it's
right,
hard.
we could talk sports for 2 hours.
All right, all right, Dallas football over here.
Let's get into. I'm curious, and I think a lot of people are curious. And I know you've talked about this before, but what do you think you did different compared to others that got you to such crazy stats? Right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a couple of things. Let me start by saying that the characteristics that I see very, very consistently in the top producers in our business have 3 qualities. Number one, they're an expert at something, real true expert. So pick a narrow slice of the market, know everything about it. That has to be small enough that you can really understand every single aspect of it, but large enough that you can make a good living. 2, got to have passion for the business. Always has been, is, and always will be cyclical. So despite how good you are, you're going to have tough times. The love of the business keeps you around so that you'll be around for when the times inevitably get better, which they will. And the third thing is being able to use discipline well. And I say use discipline as opposed to have discipline because we all have the same amount of discipline. We choose to use it differently. So I think one of the things that has helped me has been able to use discipline well.
Just being very structured day in and day out.
Yeah, just you got to do the same fundamental things over and over and over again, and sometimes that's really tough to do. But I think that's been helpful, and just the fact that I do really, really love this. I always tell people that selling buildings is my vocation, but it's also my hobby. I have a wife and a 16-year-old daughter, Sophie, and in my free time, I just want to spend as much time as possible with them. But, if they were to go out of town on a girls' weekend, I'm going to be selling buildings all weekend. It's what I really enjoy. Some people like playing golf, whatever. So my life is very simple. I spend time with my wife and daughter. I go to the gym, I go to church, and I sell buildings. That's it. That's my life. Very, very simple and basic. So I think that's been helpful. And, I think that just trying to narrowly define what you do, our value proposition is always very, very straightforward and simple. Only sell buildings, only represent sellers, only work on exclusives, only work in New York. Nothing is vague or ambiguous about that. You can't be all things to all people. So I always have had several clients that have said, Bob, I will never, ever buy a building from you. Your prices you get are too high.
You're too good. I think that's too good.
Yeah, if I ever sell, you'll be my first call, but I'm never buying anything from you. And you know what? Again, you can't be all things to all people. So if that's my lot in life, I'm happy.
We certainly know brokers, in Texas where I practice, where, they're the ones you want to go to buy from, and they're the others are the ones you want to go to resell from. I get that. Well, I want to know what, and a lot of people don't know this stuff. What makes New York different than other markets in the country, right? It's such a unique, weird market. What's different about it?
Well, one thing I'll say is that I think brokers in New York, myself included, tend to think we're better than we really are.
It's not just brokers, by the way.
It's
every New Yorker, right?
But I say that only because in good times or bad times or any times, there's always so much demand to buy stuff here. Mm-hmm. There's always a market. There's always a market clearing price. There's always going to be multiple bids, no matter what it is. It could be the hairiest, building. It could have nuclear waste making the building glow in the dark. There's 100 people want to buy it. So I think it is. It's a market that has some big advantages. Obviously, people want to come live and work here. People want to invest here. It's got so many different things culturally and, a number of reasons why it is the greatest city in the world. But I will tell you that I sell a lot of land. So the fact that it's an as-of-right zoning jurisdiction is great. Every piece of land is entitled. We often sell land with a 30-day closing or, deposits are hard right away. There's no due diligence periods.
Wow.
So those are things that make the market function very, very well. So if you understand that there's always going to be a lot of demand, the marketing process for a building really is about creating a level playing field, creating maximum exposure, getting as many eyeballs on a property as possible, getting as many bids as possible. Then it's just a matter of employing tactics to advantage your seller as best you can to extract the highest possible price. So it really is more of a mechanical process than you would think. And I think that's a big part of it. There's a slice that requires ingenuity and creativity and stuff like that. But the nuts and bolts of it really is very, very straightforward.
I've seen firsthand how the right platform can make all the difference for advisors and their clients. With decades of collective experience in investment sales, debt placement, and equity placement services, Graysteel has built a culture where collaboration, relationships, and excellence power results. Backed by concierge-level infrastructure, proprietary technology, and an entrepreneurial mindset, the firm enables professionals like myself and our team to deliver tailored solutions, precision-driven pricing strategies, AI-enhanced insights, and exceptional value at every stage. Discover how top professionals are scaling their business and continually unlocking new opportunities for their clients at graysteel.com.
I'm sure a lot of people would say, you become as successful as you are because of your deep market knowledge. And that just comes from hours. And, I think part of that stems from the map room and things like that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about, when you guys were approaching your peak, what were you doing to really learn the market better than anybody else cold?
Yeah, well, so let's go back to our roots when we started the firm. We always wanted to be different from everybody. And this is something that still is going on today, and I can explain that. But it's my whether it's my experience with social media or my new company or going back to 1984 when we started in the business. How are you different? Look, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people trying to do what we all do.
Yeah.
How are you going to stand out? Why should somebody come to you as opposed to someone else? And, back in the 80s when we started, publicly available information was very opaque, and what was available was very inaccurate. So we said, you know what? Let's just focus on a neighborhood and get to know what's going on. With young kids coming into this gigantic city, didn't even know half the neighborhoods. Like, how are we going to operate in this giant city? Let's just pick a small, manageable territory, get to know everything about it. And that created a way for us to differentiate ourselves. That differentiation created a competitive advantage. So we go into a seller and say, yeah, we've only been working for 2 years and we've sold 3 buildings, but one was down the street, one was across the street, and one was right next door to you. And we can advocate for you better to convince buyers to pay a higher price because we know this neighborhood better than anybody. That got a lot of traction for us. And that was a way for us to compete with people who had been in the business for 10 or 20 years. So looking at trying to do things differently is the way to do that. And market knowledge is one of those things. How many buildings? I talk to kids all the time who call me or DM me on social media, and somebody's in Toledo, Ohio, and says, how do I compete? I have people in the business that have been here 15, 20, 25 years. How do I compete with them? I said, what do you do? He said, well, I sell apartment buildings. I said, okay, well, how many apartment buildings are in your market? I don't know. I said, you know what? Get a map, draw a line around the map, count every building. How many buildings of each size? What's the average, what are the average prices? Look at comps for 3 years. I said, and go into a seller and say, look, I focus on multifamily in this market. There's 1,235 buildings in the market. Here's how many sold last year. Here's how many sold.
Spitting some game.
And all of a sudden I said, I guarantee you that the broker who's been in the market for 25 years has no idea how many buildings are in the market.
So that leads me to this question. When you are getting business as a broker, do you think that clients are engaging and going to you because of the professional that they're working with or the company that they're working with?
No, I think it depends what sector of the market you're talking about. I think if you look at investment sales, you can break most of the market down into 2 main buckets. You have the institutional bucket and then the private capital bucket. The private capital bucket is probably in terms of number of transactions is 98, 99% of the market. Institutions typically will go with a company only because the asset manager or the person making that decision at the institution has none of their own capital in the building. Mm-hmm. And if they hire somebody and that broker screws it up,
CYA.
the guy could lose his job.
Yeah, you can't look bad by hiring the biggest firm.
Yeah, right. They want to cover their ass in case something doesn't. They went with the big guys.
But for the overwhelming majority of people, I don't think. I mean, everybody talks about my baseball card and my baseball business card. The reason I created that was because I ran into a client who's been a client for 30 years. I had been at JLL for 4 years. And I ran into him, and I was talking about what he's up to. And he said, "Oh yeah, I have my big site in Long Island City. I'm going to break ground. I'm looking for a construction loan." I said, "Oh, you should talk to our mortgage guys. They're really good." And he said, "Oh, thanks, Bob, but I'm going to go with JLL." I said, "Hal, I've been at JLL for 4 years."
Right.
"Oh, I thought you were still at Cushman." So I put the baseball card together. I bet you that 40% of my clients have no idea what company I'm at.
Right.
And nor would they care.
So what you're saying is that at your point, they are going with you. They're not going with the name, brand, company. They're
I
using
think at
Bob.
any point, at any point, it's what are you bringing to the table? What can you do for that client? The company doesn't sell the building.
Yeah.
The individual sells the building. Is the company's not answering the phone on Saturday at 10 a.m. or Sunday at 5 p.m.
Right.
It's the broker who's doing that. They have this thing, my buddy Ed Winslow, who's actually the first salesman we ever hired at Bob Knakal, has developed, taken what our system was, and he's defined it as proof stacking.
Mm-hmm.
And what proof stacking is constantly reinforcing to the market, I have the capability, I have the expertise, I've done this for that client, I can do this for you, and constantly do that. And if you're constantly proof stacking and showing you know the market and you have expertise, you break down the inclination of people to go with a company.
To a similar beat of you becoming the neighborhood expert. At what point, because for those who don't know, you became very good at selling assemblages and development parcels. Mm-hmm. What was the tide turn? At one point you start coming in, you're selling buildings. At what point do you start maximizing value and creating these parcels?
Yeah, well, I think that as time went on, when publicly available information became more and more accurate and much more available, I mean, you can go on Google today and get somebody's home address, their shoe size, whatever you want about somebody. So the neighborhood expertise has become much less important. I think that the product specialization and expertise in one particular type of transaction is much more important today than it was back decades ago. And so I think if you take into consideration that brokers basically have two main assets, which are market knowledge and time, you're always trying to increase your knowledge base, but you can't make more time. So how do you use time more effectively? And you can actually create time. So let's assume last week I sold a retail property, an apartment building, and an office building. And this week I'm pitching an office building. That owner doesn't care about the retail property or the apartment building I sold. So 2/3 of the time I spent last week is not accretive towards getting this week's assignment. Had I sold 3 office buildings last week and I'm selling an office building this week, 100% of my time was accretive towards getting this week's assignment. So there, I'm actually creating time.
That's a great breakdown.
Yeah. So that's why I think, we're doing a lot of value add. Like back in the 80s, we tried to differentiate ourselves by the geographic specialization. Today, the way I'm differentiating is by trying to do, most of what I do is development and redevelopment stuff. Ground up development, putting assemblages together, converting office buildings to alternative uses, stuff like that. And so I'm doing brokerage like a developer. Rather than doing brokerage like a broker.
Can you tell us what that looks like? Because I find it to be pretty interesting how assemblages are put together in New York City with air rights and whatnot. Can you walk us through the process?
Yeah, well, given that it's an as-of-right zoning jurisdiction, zoning tells you 3 main things about every parcel. It tells you what type of building you can have with residential, commercial, hotel, manufacturing. It tells you what shape the building can have. That's called contextual zoning, and that deals with sky plane exposures and the sun coming onto the street and all kinds of stuff. And then importantly, there's something called floor to area ratio, which tells you how big the building can be. And FARs tell you for every square feet of land you have, how many square feet of building you can have on that land. And so if you think about it, if there's a 5-story building in an area that calls for a 10 FAR, you can think that there are a whole series of 1 square foot lucite blocks sitting on top of the building. And you can sell those. And so that they're a tangible product that can be sold, and there are rules and guidelines about how you can sell them, who you can sell them to, that kind of thing. And it today, there's so much new legislation around changing these FARs and having to put affordable housing into deals and, transferability of the air rights. Everything's changing. So what I've done now is I've formed an in-house policy and zoning SWAT team. I have zoning attorneys, architects, cost estimators, policy mavens, and we can take a look at a property, and within 48 hours, we can tell you exactly what you can do with it. And it's a huge competitive advantage. We just won an assignment on a development site where 3 other brokers went into the owner and said, this site has 60,000 buildable square feet, and here's what we think it's worth. Our guys found, using an obscure concept in the new City of Yes legislation called a compensating recess, where we were able to get 74,000 buildable feet out of that site. So of course we got the assignment. Mm-hmm. But this is a way to create a competitive advantage and differentiate yourself through market knowledge and expertise. And this stuff is so complicated that even the very best zoning people in the city will often say, I don't really know the answer. I have to look that up. Because the zoning resolution here is thousands and thousands of pages.
Yeah, New York City zoning code is like trying to read an Aramaic. Well, so hats off to you.
I don't want to, this isn't let's bash New York City hour, but you do hear people complain about regulations here and it impeding with business and development. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that public policy is very, very highly correlated to the way our markets work. Mm-hmm. I think, interestingly, our apartment building market, the performance of that market is actually more highly correlated to public policy than supply and demand, which is really crazy if you think about it. But our politicians have totally screwed it up. The solution to all of New York's housing problems are clearly on the supply side. Yeah. And even if you are a policymaker that believes an Econ 101 textbook is capitalist propaganda, just look no further than the pandemic. A lot of people moved out of the city. That created great vacancy. Great vacancy is like adding to supply. Rents dropped by 30% in 2020 in Manhattan. There isn't a housing policy that's been implemented anywhere in the United States that has made rents go down 10%.
That's a good point.
Let alone 30%.
Yeah.
So create more supply. What our elected officials do, because you get more votes this way,
right,
is say, we're going to confiscate private property and we're going to restrict what an owner can do with their property rather than figure out how to create more units. And there's a reason for this. The reason is that if you create more supply, you bring people into your district that don't know you and might not vote for you. And there are a lot of stories about this being the position of these policymakers, that they don't want new supply. So they're completely hypocritical. They say they want New York City to be more affordable for everybody. Yet until City of Yes passed, just December 5th of last year, until that passed, from 2018 through last December, every single piece of legislation that was either passed or ignored did nothing but constrict supply and exert upward pressure on rents, making it less affordable for everybody. So I think there is an education process our policymakers have to go through. I think that we need to change the way things are done, because there's an inherent conflict in what our policymakers are doing. They're supposed to be thinking about their constituents and doing what's in the best interest of their constituents, as opposed to immediately after getting elected thinking about how they're going to get reelected.
I've seen firsthand how the right platform can make all the difference for advisors and their clients. With decades of collective experience in investment sales, debt placement, and equity placement services, Graysteel has built a culture where collaboration, relationships, and excellence power results. Backed by concierge-level infrastructure, proprietary technology, and an entrepreneurial mindset, the firm enables professionals like myself and our team to deliver tailored solutions, precision-driven pricing strategies, AI-enhanced insights, and exceptional value at every stage. Discover how top professionals are scaling their business and continually unlocking new opportunities for their clients at graysteel.com.
Yeah. On the topic of new supply, and I'm sure you've been asked this in every conversation you've had, to my record, there's about 12 million square feet of office to residential conversions. You're starting to see this form. You've seen a lot of cycles in New York. Good impacts, bad impacts, pros, cons. What can you tell us?
There's nothing bad about it.
Yeah.
Everything is good. We had 100 million feet vacant or to be vacant. Now there's 85, 90 million feet vacant. There's still a lot of overhang of office space that's empty, which is exerting downward pressure on rents, particularly in the B and C sector. And we desperately need housing. So you look at things like the City of Yes legislation has been great. The 467M program to incentivize the conversion of these office buildings to residential, a fantastic program. You pay no real estate taxes during the construction period, and then you get a 90% discount on real estate taxes moving forward. I mean, that's unbelievable. So I think that finally we're getting some policy that is making sense for the conversion. But I think to convert this older, obsolete stock into apartments is great. I also think if you look at our tax abatement program for new construction, for years and years, we had a 421A tax abatement program. That sunsetted. Governor Cuomo brought back the 421A in the form of Affordable New York. Affordable New York sunsetted. Today, we have 485X. Affordable New York was a watered-down version of 421A. 485X is a watered-down version of Affordable New York. It basically is completely misguided and useless legislation. You can build under 99 units. Over 99 units is very, very challenging. So I think our policymakers have egged all over their face about 485X and didn't want to have another clunker piece of legislation. So that's why the pending legislation for Midtown South rezoning was originally planned to go from an FAR density from 10 to 12. Now it's going from 10 to 18. Because it actually, if that passes in that form, it's going to produce a tremendous amount of activity. I've said the other day that, 10, 15 years from now, the coolest, hippest place to live in New York is going to be in the Garment Center. Yeah. Because half the buildings are going to be demolished and it's going to be all new construction.
You think it's going to have a kind of revitalization like FIDE?
Yeah, without a doubt. Even more so because there are a lot of under density buildings in the Garment Center that are going to be demolished.
There's an explosion of demand in office space along Park Avenue corridor. That's no longer even in headlines. That's a known fact. Do you think there's another neighborhood that comes back as a prominent office sector?
Well, interestingly, I think the demand for office is so geographically diverse that I don't think you're going to see office clustered too much other than around mass transit, which is really important. But even away from mass transit, you have great demand for office space. And so I think that demand is going to come back. When it comes back, it's going to come back very, very quickly. But we still have an overhang of space that needs to be converted.
Yeah, I can tell just in talking to you right now how passionate you are. And you were just saying that's one of the keys to success. And you clearly still have it. I mean, you're in it. You can tell. So I just learned 20 new things.
Yeah, there you go.
I wanted to ask, bring us back to brokerage because we do have just a lot of broker listeners. Client comes to you and says, I want to sell this, but I don't want you to market it. I want you to sell it off market.
You've never been asked anything
what are your thoughts? What do you say?
I generally say, I'm not the right broker for you.
And why is that?
Because, look, there's no such thing as an off-market deal. The minute you go to one buyer with a deal, it's on the market.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I generally say, one of the interesting things about New York is that I often tell clients, look, if you ask me right now to make up a list of the top 100 buyers for your building, there's a 50% chance the buyer is not going to be on this list. And it's not because they don't know the market. It's because there's so many people that want to buy stuff here. There's always new people coming into the market. And, that varies sector by sector. But the fact is there's so many new people coming in and you don't know who's going to have the equity partner that's going to induce them to make a deal today. Who just sold a building and has a 1031 exchange that hasn't been in the market for 10 years, but all of a sudden wants to buy something. Who the heck knows? And I've sold properties to people who never bought a building more expensive than 30 or 40 million that bought $100 million deal.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that guy is buying this deal. You're always surprised. So I say, look, what I do, I maximize prices for people. You want me to only go to 10 people? I can't guarantee you I'm going to get the highest price. I guarantee out of the 10 people, I can get 8 of them to make a bid, but you only get to sell a building once. If you screw it up, you don't get a do-over.
Yeah.
So do it right the first time.
I never got it. I never understood why someone would want to sell off market than really, casting as wide of a net as possible, to your point. I guess sometimes the pushback can be, we don't want to spook our staff, but don't you want to be transparent with your staff? They're going to find out one way or the other, right?
I never understood off market. Forget someone's desire for it. I just never understood it because, to your point, what's off market about it?
Yeah.
So you quietly go to 10 people as if they're not going to talk? Like,
tell us, you've become pretty prolific on social media. And in fact, I would say you're probably one of the most followed, if not the most followed, professional in our business on social media. How did you get into that? And give us your thoughts on it, right?
Yeah, well, how I got into it was pure pressure. I'll be the first one to admit. I was a big naysayer for social media. I thought it was a waste of time. And, one of the interesting things about the real estate business is, other than 7 friends I have that I went to kindergarten with, every single friend of mine is in the real estate business. And it just happens somebody's a client, turn into a friend, or somebody's a friend, they turn into a client. But all the people I socialize with are in the real estate business. So I'm always telling stories about, deals and personalities and things. And people would say, "Hey, Bob, that's such a great story. You really should put that on social media." And I never really thought it would be worth the time to do it. But I finally caved in, and at the end of 2022, I said, you know what, I'll start in January of 23, see how it goes. I'll give it 3 months and just test it out. And the first thing I did, again, wanting to be different, I kind of looked at the horizon. What are brokers doing? And what I saw was a lot of, hey, we just listed this and we just sold this. And when they just sold it, it's like, hey, here's the size of the building and here's the price. I'm like, what do people really care about? I want to know, hey, what did the seller say? What did the buyer say? What were the hurdles you had to overcome? What were the things that were unique or interesting about the deal? So I said, you know what, I'm going to try to bring something a little different to it. In the Massey Knakal days, one of my jobs, Paul ran the business and did a lot of the administrative stuff. But my job from a company perspective is to kind of motivate the troops. So I would write a lot of motivational emails, thought for the week kind of thing. And so I do a little bit of that on Mondays. Tuesday, I tell deal stories about, lift up the hood, see what was under there. How did the deal get done? Thursdays, I do a throwback Thursday. And then Friday, I do a, lessons learned, the Knakal Nuggets thing, which has been well received. And so just trying to do things a little differently. And the first impression that really struck me about social media was, back when I started, we were posting around 10 o'clock in the morning every day. Today, we post at 7:30 in the morning. And I have a great team out in Washington State that does all my posting and everything.
And you find you get more engagement that early, or is there a reason for that?
You have to ask Mo Regalado, who runs my social media.
And they're planning ahead for the week. They know what they're going to post.
I write all my stuff on Sunday and ship it out to them, and they take care of doing all the mechanics. But so I'm posting at 10 o'clock, and I had early on, I posted the big map that I have, which is now in the map room, and I had it spread out. I did a picture of me. I spread it out on the floor in my country house in Connecticut and took a picture of me standing on the map. And we posted at 10. By 11 o'clock, I had 8 or 9 people at JLL come up to me. Hey, BK, we saw that map. That's so cool. Blah, blah. Yeah. And so the impression was twofold. Number one, I was like, wow, it's like, people are on social media. They're looking at this stuff. The other thing that struck me was, what the hell are you doing looking at social media between 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday? Go work, So I'm like, hey, if this is happening here, this is probably happening everywhere. Yeah. So I was really shocked at the reach that it has. And it has, again, the whole, it is one of the components of what we call market presence. Right. I'm a big believer. You follow me on social media. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. It has to be that way because in New York City, for instance, there are 250,000 people that own buildings in New York. I'm a good cold caller. I can't cold call 250,000 people.
Yeah.
So I need people coming to me in addition to my outreach. But market presence, you got to make calls, you got to send texts, send emails, send hard mail, very underrated hard mail. You have to speak in public. You have to create content, be on social media. You have to do all these things to become known. Social media is such a great way to magnify all the things that you're doing and get out there. And all of these things, people view me. It was interesting. Just The Real Deal just did a story the other day and said, "Oh, Bob Knakal's probably the most robust self-promoter in the business." Why? I'm not self-promoting because I want people to say, "Oh, Knakal's so great." I self-promote because I want people to know me because that is going to get me in the way of information.
And it's working.
To advantage my clients. Yeah. We have a building under contract that the buyer I met through LinkedIn. That buyer is paying my client $2 million more than anybody else in the market. Am I doing it for me? No, I'm doing it for my clients.
So tell us, so this brings up another topic, I think. I think a lot of people are scared to post on social media. I think people are scared of getting negative feedback. I know I am. I mean, I think it's natural to not want people to speak negatively about you, right? But the moment you really start caring, you've lost. I think. How do you? Well,
I think number one.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you stay away from toxic topics.
Yeah.
Don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics.
That's all Alex likes to talk about. So just
but I just think you can get off on a tangent. If you are on to try to help your clients who are in the real estate business, then talk about real estate.
Yeah.
And offer something that you think will be of interest. To try not to be controversial. I think I've been very, very lucky in that I've had very, very little negative feedback. And maybe I'm just lucky about that, or maybe I'm just trying to not get into that area that could be controversial. But I just like talking about deals. I like talking about the business.
The news is important, but if you're a busy real estate professional like me, you don't have time to skim through dozens of dry and ad-filled media outlets each day. That's why I read the CRE Daily. It's a free email newsletter that cuts through the clutter and delivers concise, witty commentary on the latest trends and transactions in commercial real estate. If you're a commercial real estate professional, you owe it to yourself to try it out and stay on top of what's happening in the industry. It's only 5 minutes a day. Visit credaily.com to sign up for free.
Well, I love your posts. I mean, and for what it's worth, I think the negative feedback, I think there's always going to be haters. I think there's always going to be people judging you or disapproving of how you're doing something. But I think with social media, I think you nailed it. You want to stay in people's top of mind. And what better way to do that than take advantage of really all those avenues?
That's a great point, top of mind. And that's why you do it. That's why you do market presence. If you think about it, in New York, using Manhattan as a microcosm, south of 96th Street, 27,649 buildings. The average turnover over 40 years of that stock has averaged 2.6% in a year, right? What does that mean? That means when somebody buys a building here, they hold on to it for 40 years before they sell it. So, what makes people sell? Well, the old reliable death, divorce, taxes, partnership disputes, things that make them need to sell. There could be a discretionary reason they want to sell, but it's once every 40 years on average. So you have to be top of mind to be there when something happens and they go, "Oh, wow, I have to sell." Then the next thing you want them to think of is, "Hey, call Bob."
Right.
So how do you do that? You achieve that by being out there
in every way possible, including social media.
Since we're towards the end, we'll take a little bit of a different beat. You've seen a lot of different market cycles, a lot of administrations come and go. What do you, and not just in New York, what are you hopeful for? What's your future outlook today?
Well, look, I just operate in New York, so it's hard for me. I can talk tangentially about what's happening around the country, but let's just look at New York. The real estate industry, one of the things that just doesn't make any sense to me is that the real estate industry is so impactful on New York. The real estate industry directly or tangentially contributes 54% to our city budget. between real estate taxes, mortgage recording taxes, transfer taxes, other charges and fees, 54% of the budget. Yet our politicians some of them won't even take a campaign contribution from a real estate person. How could you, your most impactful sector, how are you not embracing that? And so I think to the extent that our policymakers would embrace the industry and realize, hey, if the real estate industry is doing well, if the business community is doing well, it's going to be great for all of us. Because whether you are on the extreme right or the extreme left, if you don't have revenue, you can't do anything. So you need revenue. You should want the real estate industry to do well. You should want business to do well. I don't understand why there's that big disconnect.
It seems very straightforward when you say it, right? It's almost like I envision two divisions of a company. Your policy people are the FP&A division, and then everybody, the real estate sector is your sales. Like, you should be talking to each other, sharing what the projections look like, but yet it's so discombobulated. And I wonder what sets that tone. Who knows?
Yeah.
I had a question going back to generating business, cold calling. At your point in your career, are you still making a lot of cold calls?
Every day. Well, they're not cold calls anmore.
Soft,
because
lukewarm calls.
I call them prospecting calls because
Yeah.
I know these people. Cold call is you calling somebody you never spoke to or never called before.
But they're new people.
Really
they're
important.
new people in the market, right?
Yeah, no, but I am prospect calling all the time. For years and years and years, my goal every week was to speak to 50 property owners and get around to asking them if there's anything they wanted to sell in their portfolio. Today, and since the pandemic, it's been 100 a week. Because I was much more productive working from home during the pandemic because, if you are a Seinfeld fan, you know that there's something called the stop and chat.
Yes. Yeah.
So somebody comes
Yes.
over, hey, how was your weekend? Before you know it, 10 minutes has gone by. And I found during the pandemic, working from home, it's like I don't have the stop and chats. So I was much more productive.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I was getting 50, 54, 52 connections a week. All of a sudden, I'm over 100.
Yeah.
And in 2020, I averaged 114 connections a week, and my best year ever. It's since gone down. But the goal is 100 a week. And you have to be out there. You have to be talking to people.
You can't just be an inbound broker.
Look, if you have been around for a long time, you've been in the business more than 10 years and you're relatively successful, you don't have to make the prospecting calls. It's shocking to me. I would bet that 95% of brokers do not have a formal prospecting plan where they have a group of folks that they are constantly calling over and over and over again. It doesn't happen.
And that's your use
it.
of discipline.
And and that is the number one thing to generate business consistently is to keep calling people over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Love it.
Where do you see the market going?
In New York, I think the market is on the upswing. I think one thing that's different about this correction from the past 4 corrections is that different market sectors are going in different directions. Today, our retail market's on the upswing. Hotels are on fire. The land market is on the upswing. Industrial is doing well. Multifamily is still having its challenges, mainly because of the political headwinds we're facing. The office sector, you need to disaggregate into 2. Class A new construction doing really, really well. B and C, a lot of challenges, a lot of headwinds. So it really depends what sector you're talking about, but generally the market's on the upswing, getting better. I think we've had, the interesting thing about that 2.6% turnover average I mentioned, it's been consistent. That was 2.6% at the end of the 80s, at the end of the 90s, at the end of the noughts, at the end of the last decade, and it always reverts back to that average. And we've had 7 years of below trend turnover. So I think this year we're going to have the highest the turnover has ever been is 4.3% in 2012 as people were rushing to beat the 3.8% capital gains tax increase that was embedded in the healthcare law. I think turnover is going to be over 5% this year because we have at the same time, for the first time in 40 years, we have a very robust collection of discretionary sellers in those sectors that are doing well and a robust collection of non-discretionary sellers in the sectors that are doing poorly that are going to be selling at the same time. So I think it's going to be, from a transactional perspective, it's going to be an unbelievable year.
Yeah, I know everyone's really expecting 2026 to crush. We keep hearing the term, I don't know, we keep hearing it. Never mind. Stay in the mix till 26 is the new slogan.
We were just talking about this on a previous episode where it was first it was survive till 25, but now my favorite one is fix it in 26 or fix it in some combination of
take your licks till 26.
You heard it here,
so
folks.
I think that's the reality, but the fix it in 26 was so funny to me because it implied that we're going to do like survive till 25 was we're going to do everything we can, be hands-on and proactive to make sure we stay afloat until 2025. But fix it in 26 is like we give up this year. Next year, we'll pick this up again.
No, I think 25 is going to be an awesome year.
I do too.
Yeah.
A lot is happening. And I will tell you that the activity that bankruptcy attorneys are seeing is unbelievable. These guys are shooting fish in a barrel. It's unreal what's happening. And the names that are seeking advice from bankruptcy attorneys is unreal. It's unreal. So I think on the non-discretionary selling side, there's going to be a lot of moves that are going to shock the heck out of people.
Well, I know we're kind of running low on time, but a couple of things. I wanted to talk about what are your thoughts with AI? Because everyone's talking about AI, maybe a little too much, but it is impacting things. And then I want to talk about what your recommendations would be for new brokers, in the field.
Right. Okay. So AI, the map room and I'm old school. So I'm about as analog as it gets. The map room is a completely analog wonderland. But we are layering on AI, and I think it's going to be amazing what it's going to do. I'll take you back to 1984. I'm sitting at my desk, no computer, no fax machine, no cell phone. So you think about how the world has changed in the last 40 years. The next 5 years, it's going to blow the past 40 away. So the first person I hired at the new firm was my COO, Seth Samowitz, who was an AI guy. He started AI companies. He worked in driverless cars for 6 years. I said, if this guy can make a car drive itself, he can help me sell a building. So we are using AI in 3 ways. And I will tell you, AI is not going to replace anybody, but somebody using AI will replace somebody who's not using it. We're using it for prospecting and for deal execution. Both of those are simply funneling processes. And so AI makes those processes much more efficient and effective. The third way we're using it, which has the potential to be the most powerful, but is going to be the toughest for the industry to use, is in data interpretation. The reason it's so potentially powerful is AI can do millions of calculations a second. The reason it's going to be really challenging for the industry is because most data sets suck in our industry, right? Because what matters with data sets is the relationship between numbers, not the numbers themselves. If I tell you that in 2019, there was $23.6 billion of investment sales in New York City, in Manhattan, you don't know what to think about that number. But if I tell you that at the peak of the market in 2015, it was $57.4 billion, and at the trough of the market in 2020 during the pandemic, it dropped to $11.1 billion. Now, all of a sudden, the 26.3 has some feel to it. So it's the relationship between the numbers that matter, not the absolute numbers. But if the numbers were not calculated using the same exact methodology every year, the integrity between those numbers falls apart. And, I've seen at companies that within 10 years, you've had 3 different heads of research, each who have a different opinion about what the methodology for calculating data should be. So the set over time is worthless. Whereas we have data sets that I've been calculating, because I'm so into stats, I've been calculating using the same methodology for 40 years. So we're applying AI models to these data sets that have very high integrity, providing unbelievable insights. In fact, we're coming out with the Knakal Land Index, which is going to take land values in the city. And most companies will say, oh, last year in Manhattan, the average price was X dollars a buildable foot. That's like saying, well, last year, the average price of a peach, a bowling ball, and a 2x4 was $11.50. So we've disaggregated the data into 5 buckets: rental, condo, hotel, office, miscellaneous, and have the data sets going back 40 years. And we're applying AI models to see what economic factor or factors lead to fluctuations and change in direction and magnitude for the changes in land values. So really, really insightful stuff. And I am the least technologically savvy person there is. I'm glad my cell phone goes on in the morning, but I'm a big fan of Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan's books. One of them is Who Not How. And the main thesis of that book is when you come up with a good idea and you say to yourself, that's a great idea. How am I going to do this? You're asking the wrong question.
Yeah.
This is a great idea. Who am I going to get to do this?
It sounds like you got it. Yeah. Okay. So any advice for young professionals? Doesn't have to be brokers, just young professionals in the industry.
Expert. Look, you want to create value in yourself. If you are in the real estate brokerage business, you probably are a person who wants to have a certain level of independence. You want to create wealth for yourself. You want to do really well. And so how do you create the most value in yourself? Be an expert. If you're truly an expert at what you do and you curate your own proprietary data sets and you don't rely on third-party aggregators. If you rely on third-party aggregators, you know better than an 8th grader that can go to that aggregator and pull the same exact report. So create value in yourself and put yourself in a position where your company needs you more than you need your company. If you need your company more than your company needs you, you are at risk because the company could pull the plug on you at any second and you're out of luck. So you want to have independence and you want to feel like you really are valuable. You can create value in yourself, real tangible, strong value by being a market expert and understanding a certain aspect of the market better than anybody else.
Yeah.
I think that's sound advice.
I think that's great advice. Yeah.
Be that kid in Toledo who knows how many buildings are in the market, how many sold last year, how many sold the year before that, how many sold the year before that, what the average price per unit was, what the average cap rate was. Know these things. You're creating real value. People will want, every company will want you if you get to that point.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a headline in Toledo next year that there's a new power broker on the scene. Hey, Bob, thanks for coming down on the snowy, sludgy day. When was the last time you were down in this neighborhood?
Not too long ago, actually. There's a great Italian place on 11th Street that I go to frequently, and my favorite cheesecake in the world is Italian cheesecake, and Viniero's is on 11th Street.
Amazing. Yeah. Love Viniero's.
He's probably the wrong guy to ask because you are such a
I love Viniero's.
True and true. I know you
That's
do.
where that birthday cake came from.
That's right. That's
the
right.
ricotta cheesecake at Viniero's is absolutely the best in the world.
You heard it here.
There's a marzipan cake that they have that just crushes.
And then you go next door, you go to Russo's, and you get the homemade mozzarella and the prosciutto, and I tell you, that is the best thing in the world.
It's amazing.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on, Bob.